And a very good evening to you. I am Lisa Lord, and my special guest is real estate mogul and the managing director of Altman Real Estate, Sir Paul Altman. Sir Paul, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Now, straight off, you've been in real estate for more than 40 years, but how did you get started?
Well, I guess the best way to describe that is that I was away at school. I was at university, came back to Barbados. My father was involved in owning some property, and I liked what I saw in terms of what he was doing, and I decided that maybe I could try my hand at it. And of course, one thing led to another, and I had some friends in Speightstown, and I was able to go there and convince a number of people to assemble a few properties on the basis that if I could find tenants that would want to operate businesses in these properties when they were rebuilt, that they would put them into the deal. So it was one of those things where I went out, and it was me and a partner of mine, and we literally designed a new project to fit where those buildings are. And today it's the Speightstown Mall. And it was something that we could never have done any other way. So the way it works is simply you find the location, you then come up with a concept of what you want to be there, and then you go and find the people that will rent it. And then the rest is history. And then you go to, the bank was a lot more tolerant in those days.
Really?
Except for one problem. We didn't have money in the deal other than the money that we got from the tenants and from the fact that the owners of the properties were willing to join us in the effort. And I guess the one thing that happened that was really almost devastating in the sense that we nearly lost everything was that the interest rate went close to 20%. And, after putting all that work in and making it all happen, and we were all excited, we had a lot of sweating to do, but that was 1980. So the good news is that 1980 is 40 plus years ago. And during that time, things leveled off and we were able to pull through. So that was a tough way to start, but it was a good lesson.
Now, you said you were away at school. What did you study?
I studied business administration and I majored in economics. I went to the University of Miami. And of course, we just had graduation here at Cave Hill this weekend, and I chair Cave Hill. So I have linked, we have a memorandum of understanding with the University of Miami that I went to. So there's a link between, I always try to see if there's a benefit that can be derived in any situation.
And as you said, in 1980, things were much different to how they are now. But
Yes.
one thing has remained constant, and that's the constant rise in property prices.
Right. Yes, but when I think of property in Barbados, I think of different strata of property. So you're talking about the tourism type property, which are mostly these villas and mostly on what we call themed resorts, like golf or tennis or beach. And then you have properties that mainly are owned by Barbadians, like you and me. And then you have properties that are commercial. You have land that is agricultural, that is designated. So you have these different areas of definition of what real estate, how it's all valued separately. And some prices move more than others. The foreign market investment type of villa product is the one that may move more than any of the others, especially beachfront.
A lot of prospective homeowners will not agree with that, however. Do you think that property prices now are out of the reach of the average Barbadian?
The answer to that is I know that that property prices have risen substantially.
Yeah.
But if I think of 1980 and I think of today and I think of the younger people that have gone through the same university and have better jobs, I'm not quite sure that they could have afforded the prices when they were lower in 1980 any more than they can afford them today at the higher prices. And and then the comparison is made with other Caribbean islands. And I know that Jamaica, I just met with a big uh, property developer in Jamaica, from Jamaica, and they were explaining the tremendous rise in prices in Jamaica. Of course, Trinidad, we think of Jamaica and Trinidad as our bigger islands. Of course, they may be more affordable in St. Lucia, but not much different. The prices have arisen there as well. So yes, I'm not trying to defend the rising of property prices or values, um, but it's inevitable. And the one thing I always say is that prices continue to rise, um, but at the same time, we have had dips in pricing because the market kind of stabilizes or it may drop slightly. You get discounted values on some properties. So it's all over the place. I think what is rising more than property than land itself is the cost of construction,
Yes.
and that is
Building
where
materials,
we are now fighting the real battle: the cost of construction, labor costs, and material costs, imported materials, and the supply chain, which is the new buzzword for anything that goes into construction. So it is, it's six of one and half dozen of the other. There's always a challenge.
So I guess the follow-up question to that would be, is this a buyer's market or a seller's market?
Depends what you're buying and what you're selling.
Property.
Um, you know, we are in business, and our company, Altman Real Estate, we represent the seller in all cases.
Yes.
We have been through, all kinds of, as I say, ups and down cycles. And there's always the story of the person who comes to me and says, if I had bought that property 10 years ago, I could have made double my money.
Yeah.
So my answer to that person, I said, if you buy it now, you will double your money in 10 years the same way. In other words, that is likely to happen in a stable economy, in a country that is seen as a place that most people want to live, whether they're from the Caribbean or from overseas. The number of Trinidadians buying property here continues to rise. They may not live here, but they all aspire to own a home here. And now with Guyana moving in where it is going, we sense that not only people from Guyana, but people who go to Guyana to do business and have to live there, want their families to be in Barbados while they're working in Guyana. So that's another sort of situation. And of course, the foreign market, the sense that the big item now since COVID is what happened when the Prime Minister introduced this, the welcome stamp.
Mm-hmm.
So the welcome stamp now created a full new wave of people that are coming in here. And I describe these people as people whose average age is below 50 and who came here for a year, but they don't want to leave. They discovered that this is the ideal climate, the ideal lifestyle, that the people that they live among are people that are much nicer than they would find in the big cities or places. Nicer in the sense that we are real. I don't mix up matters when it comes to that. I tell whoever I meet that if you live in Barbados, you're going to come across people that are better than you would find in any big city. In big cities, you never know who's looking from around the corner type of thing. Barbados, I think I'm never going to say we're perfect, but I think generally speaking, these people that come here on the welcome stamp, they now see this as their home. And the way I describe it is that the people that come on the welcome stamp, seeing it as their home, are not like the ones that come just for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, where they may pass a piece of garbage on the street and say, well, look how dirty, and this place needs someone to pick up the garbage. The people that come here now under the welcome stamp and want to stay here and consider this theirs, they can get out and go and pick it up and put it in the garbage. So that's the difference. And we're getting into a new wave of excitement in terms of expanding our sort of resident population.
So we have seen the benefits of the Welcome Stamp program.
Huge. To me, that is one of the biggest things that has happened, and certainly in terms of profiling Barbados as a place to live, not just to come on holiday. You know, the people that, you know, the best ambassadors for this island in terms of visitor ambassadors are the ones that have a vested interest, the ones that see this as their place.
No, you mentioned Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana. Altman Real Estate is one of the leading real estate companies in the Caribbean. Outside of pricing, when we compare our luxury properties, how do we measure up to our neighbors?
But we have a lot more per capita. So on the, you know, in terms of the size of the island, in terms of the population of the island, I think we certainly will be ahead of the curve comparing it to the other islands. And I know most of these islands quite well. I've been there, and we are connected to the largest real estate company in England, which is a global company called Savills. So we work closely with Savills, and in fact are at this point in time even getting into a much closer relationship where they see the Caribbean now as a really an exciting place for them to expand. So I think that what you will see over the next 3 to 5 years is even more people wanting to come and make this their home.
And in terms of the interest, the spin-off since the Welcome Stamp was introduced, in terms of persons saying, I want to buy a property in Barbados and make it my home, even if it's for 6 months of the year?
Yeah, well, the answer to that is that is growing. That is growing because the people that came originally on the Welcome Stamp, let us say there were 2,000 or 3,000. They have invited their friends to come, and the friends invite their friends. And I have made a comment, and I may be way over exaggerating it, but I believe we have 10,000 of those people on the island, either directly or that are starting to look around and try to find the right place for them. So 10,000 in terms of visitors that are going to come here and gradually make it their place. Now, we have a lot more than 10,000 people that are here that have holiday homes that they own here. But I'm talking about a different type of signature. I'm talking about people that really think of it as their home, as their main home, not just coming to have a holiday home. So there's a difference.
No, when we think of luxury properties, we think of places like Royal Westmoreland, Sugar Hill, both of which you were instrumental in developing. Why are developments like these so critical, not only to, you know, the tourism industry, but by extension Barbados?
Well, there's so many reasons. Let's start with a simple one, like
Sure.
may not be as simple, but land tax. Westmoreland would now have, let's say, 250 homes. The land tax revenue from Westmoreland, I don't want to guess at the number, but it is a huge contribution to the treasury of Barbados. The employment from these homes. I would take Westmoreland as an example. It's there for about 30 years now. When we started, it was a sugar area. It was sugar cane. We drove through sugar cane 30 years ago. And I happened to find an investor, and I said, look, I'm a little bit partial to golf. I played golf all my life. I said, we need a nice golf course. This was before Sandy Lane expanded. We really need and it can pay for itself by doing it as a residential community. And there was a lot of criticism about selling out Barbados in terms of selling real estate to foreign investors or foreign owners. And my argument was that if I took away the name Westmoreland and I put up a name of a fancy hotel, let's say Ritz-Carlton, and instead of saying Westmoreland Resort, Golf Resort, and I said Ritz-Carlton Resort, people wouldn't be as offended. And it is the same thing. It's the same thing as having a Ritz-Carlton Resort, except that it is a private investment as opposed to a larger company coming in. But what we were able to assemble at Westmoreland was quite special.
And you did say that you were driving through sugarcane fields at that time. And
Yes.
that's another concern where real estate is concerned, that we're taking land out of agricultural production and putting it in housing developments?
Okay, and I have an answer for that as
Sure.
well. So my answer for that is that up until now, we have taken land out of agricultural production and put it into real estate. Um, and I would say that as a percentage of the overall land of Barbados, it still represents a small proportion. I can't give you the exact areas that have been developed, but it certainly would be, my guess, 20% of the land area of Barbados. I have wrote an article about 10 years ago, and the topic that the heading on the article, I refer to it as the next wave of development, and then I put a hyphen and I put the word redevelopment. So that leads into one of the things that you mentioned that you wanted to talk about, and that is, where is this redevelopment going to take place, and what is meant by redevelopment? So the greatest opportunity when I wrote the article 10 years ago was, I see it as the towns of Barbados. Mm-hmm. Bridgetown, Oistins, Old Town, Speightstown, and then to that I added Warrens, and then I would go and add St. Philip, the six roads. Mm-hmm. So those would be the two that are not on the water. The others are all waterfront. And the greatest demand and the greatest opportunity for redevelopment is where there is existing sort of what I would say social amenities. You know, the comfort of being able to walk out and go straight to the supermarket, go onto a beach, go out on a boat, go and have a swim. So I'm still pushing that idea, and I don't claim it to be my idea, but I certainly wrote the article about it, and I suggested that the great opportunity is redevelopment, not greenfield development. Greenfield is where we take in all of the agricultural land. So let us concentrate on the cities and the areas around the cities. Let us repurpose the buildings that exist in these areas, which some of them have some wonderful old architectural sort of styles to them. Let us make it happen around the towns.
So you don't think we're taking too much land out of agriculture and putting in housing? That's the question.
No, the answer to that is yes. I think we need to be conscious of that. That is why you're going to have to always take some, but there should be a limit on that. And we need more redevelopment rather than greenfield development, because we are a scarce land, resource. So yes, I agree with you. I think we need to repurpose, rebuild, and restore, and maybe all of that will lead to what I describe as a new lifestyle, where younger people are going to find that they're not going to necessarily think in terms of building a home with their own areas of planting and all of that. The new wave of thinking is people, I see them walking around, they have a little laptop or iPad, and their lifestyle is more online. Mm-hmm. And that is without question where it's all going. Everybody's online. Now, if you're online, of course you will be able to go in the country and you'll be able to go and be a part of a farm. Maybe you could join into a farm group and spend time over there. But the main set of building, I think, is going to be town directed. And I don't think of city for Barbados, but I always say the towns.
Now, you mentioned lifestyle. And yes. We're at the luxurious Lime Grove Lifestyle Center, of yes. which you're chairman. Yes. What was your vision when you first looked at developing this multi-million-dollar center?
Well, first of all, I live in a house with 3 ladies. So I move around, and I have a wife and 2 daughters, not 3 wives, a wife and 2 daughters. And I understand what it means to retail therapy. I think retail therapy is something that most ladies, so I see you smiling, you understand what I mean. But I also think that lifestyle is something that is incorporated into this property. I served on the board of BS&T, Barbados Shipping and Trading, which then morphed into Massey. Yes. And the overall Bridgetown development that we are now assembling was started under the Barbados Shipping and Trading program for redevelopment. But it didn't happen then, and I think it's going to happen now. But I got so frustrated trying to make it happen in Bridgetown 20 years ago that I started thinking that maybe there's something that I can more or less have more control over myself. And this property was here, the land was here, and the land at Lime Grove was in an area that no one wanted to touch because Lime Grove, whole town used to flood.
Yeah.
So I spoke to quite a few engineers, and we decided that we could take the flooding out of Whole Town and put something exciting there. And of course, we were lucky because everyone moved away from this site because of the flooding, and yet I describe this as the bullseye of the west coast of Barbados. If you threw a dart, this is the center of it all. And as a result of that, and having solved the flooding problem, then I worked on what I describe as my real sense of what Barbados is about. So we talked about luxury and lifestyle. And I remember that our Prime Minister, Owen Arthur, who I got to know quite well, always made the comment, and not that, again, that he invented it, but he believed in it. He believed in the aspirational approach to life of all Barbadians. We Barbadians all want, every one of us want to move up and continue to live as nicely as we can, to enjoy the finer things in life. So having a place and a location like this, I said, we're going to make it the best that it can be, because in many places you can aim at that, but you don't have the sort of feed that would make it work. But we have the sense that I got in Barbados because of tourism, because of Barbadians being aspirational, and because of maybe my selfish approach to wanting things to be as good as they could be on this island. I said, we are going to hit it, and hit it at the highest level, and voila, Lime Grove.
And you've had the buy-in of some major international brands as well.
We had many that came and many that left, and many more that are coming. And my understanding is that this is quite common in most what we call a mixed-use environment. So the mixed-use environment means that we live, work, and play. Yeah. So mixed use. So you have everything that you ever want or need in one location. And between Lime Grove and whatever else is in Whole Town, people can come and live here, and you know, and they don't need a car even. So that's the new lifestyle. The new lifestyle is not only an electric vehicle if you go that route, but maybe not even that you need to charge it much, because you can move around and walk around, and you need that.
So it has changed the face of Whole Town.
I would like to think so. I would like to say that that the mere fact that we solved the flooding, and we are never too cocky or to the extent that we say that you're not going to get any water in Whole Town, but I think we've done a fair job of making it more reliable in terms of not having to fear being washed away.
And you do have further plans to expand Lime Grove. Tell me about that.
Well, right now we're expanding. So for this Christmas, we are building on our new car park, which was planned in the original development, but we just, you know, we were holding back some resources which we didn't have. But we knew we would come at some point in time and build it. So right now we're building 3 levels of parking, and the ground level is going to be a gourmet supermarket, a bakery. Right now we're discussing it with a wine merchant operator for the next section. We have a health clinic, and those types of things we are fitting in to the building on the ground, and then more parking. So we're doing 2 levels this year, and with a little luck we'll come back and do a 3rd level next year. So we'll have ample room for parking.
And you're looking at accommodation as well, I understand it.
But you must be hearing some things.
I'm hearing things.
Yeah, you are hearing things. Well, the answer to that is yes. In the original master plan for Lime Grove, because we have 10 acres here, and the shopping center is approximately half of that. So the other 5 acres we had permission to build 54 townhouses and condominiums. We built only 8 when we started. And so we have room, let us say, for 46 more townhouses. But instead of doing that, we have designed a hotel for that site, and we have planning permission, outline permission at this time. And we are hopefully going to push the button and build a hotel which could be very exciting for the whole town. We are not geniuses. We watch what happens in other places.
Right.
And shopping centers and towns like this, there are people that want to come and stay on the property.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily, and the beach is just across the road, so the pricing differential will maybe make this as attractive to some people, or more attractive than having to spend twice as much and just walk across to the beach than live on the beach. But I have all the other amenities here. And we're going to put some apartments on top of the hotel as well.
I had to squeeze that out of you.
Yeah. The design of the hotel is 120 rooms with 48 apartments.
Okay.
But the apartments are going to be like hotel suites, so people can buy them. They're investment product as well as places. I don't expect that people are going to necessarily. The product here is not one that many people are going to use as a full-time living experience, but there are people that are going to buy them, Barbadians, Trinidadians, visitors, so they can have holidays in them, or the income stream should be very attractive from our initial numbers crunching. It suggests that they're good investments.
Okay. Well, still a lot more to discuss. Stay with us. You're watching One on One.
Tell me who a man spends his time with, and I'll tell you the type of man he is. Isn't it true that people become like the company they keep? I'm Chris Hurdle, clinical psychologist and certified life coach. Where do you spend most of your time? What is your emotional space like? Do you find yourself most often among people who are negative, naysayers, doom and gloom, or fearmongers? Or do you find yourself mostly among people who are positive, optimistic, calm, collected, and reassuring, who exude confidence? What is your emotional space like? Be intentional. You are the pilot of your life.
Keep it clean, keep it green.
Barbadians, we invite you to get involved and play your part as we clean and green Barbados. Come into your community with media launches, bulk waste collection exercises, community engagement sessions, and giveaways. Get on board. Let's keep Barbados clean and green.
Beautiful, beautiful Barbados.
And welcome back. We're chatting with real estate mogul and the managing director of Altman Real Estate, Sir Paul Altman. So Paul, before the break, we were discussing the luxurious Lime Grove Lifestyle Center where we're doing the interview. Now, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, none of the stores, businesses in Lime Grove were considered essential, and therefore your tenants would have suffered tremendously during the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's look back at that time.
I'm not good at sort of examining painful periods, but it was a painful period. We had to work with the tenants. We have no choice. I mean, if they're not doing business, they can't pay rent. So we were lucky that we had excellent tenants, and at least what they were able to do were to cover some of the operating expenses for what we call common expenses, because we still had to keep lights on, we had to clean the place, we had to, basically make sure there was security, and we worked our way through it. It was a very difficult period. But you know, this was something that was real. We couldn't change that. But thank God we're past that now, and moving at an extremely exciting new pace.
And obviously there were no visitors coming either.
Correct.
So the villas, no one was in the villas, the
Right.
hotels, etc. So that segment of the market also suffered tremendously as well.
So you're talking about my real estate
Correct.
business. It did, and again, you know, I started saying before that the villas are all individually owned. So it was not a single decision like if you had a hotel. We have 200 villas that we manage, let's say, and we have 200 owners. And literally we had on an individual basis to work out a plan where they were able to maintain their staff, maintain their villas, and we had our management team did get special permission to go around and check, make sure the villas were in order. So it was a difficult period, but as I said, thank God we're past that.
No, you mentioned Bridgetown, Speightstown, Holetown, Warren, Six Roads earlier in our chat. You have invested heavily in urban renewal projects over the years, especially those with strong historical ties. So we're going to move now from Holetown to Speightstown. And you led the development of the Arlington Museum. Tell us about your interest in Speightstown specifically over the years.
Well, although I was born and grew up in Christchurch, my family bought a little beach property in 1956. That, you know, when you think of it, in the Gibbs area. And everyone laughed and said, well, they're buying something in 1956 in Gibbs because that's a mosquito area. But we managed to have a lot of fun, and I grew up there for I was 8 years old, and I spent a lot of my young days in that Gibbs area and made friends that lived in that area, and therefore spent a lot of time in Speightstown. So I tell people that I remember when there were the remnants of the original 5 jetties in Speightstown. So I go back in time in Speightstown, and to the extent that one of my friends, his father owned the main supermarket, which was Elmer's Supermarket at that time. And at Christmas I would go and pack bags in the supermarket. So that is my connection to Speightstown. And Arlington House, which I think you mentioned Arlington, was a health center. And I remember that. I remember people that weren't well being housed in the 2nd and 3rd level of Arlington. And so then later on in time I got involved in various things, and one of the things I got involved in was the Barbados National Trust.
You were
And
past president.
I was the past president of the National Trust. So I got to get a better feel and understanding of the heritage of the island. And you know, we were able to identify various buildings, because in Barbados we have listed buildings which are protected
Yes.
to whatever extent there are from being changed or demolished, like there would be in any heritage area. Of course, now Bridgetown has the World Heritage
Yes.
designation, UNESCO. But certainly Speightstown had Arlington and had many other buildings. Some of them, unfortunately, were damaged. One burnt down a couple of years ago. But the full study of Speightstown, I was involved in introducing a team of students who came to Barbados close to 30 years ago from the University of Florida. The University of Florida runs a program called the PIC, and it's the Preservation Institute for the Caribbean. And they enjoy the fact that we can invite them to do studies. They're mainly around the architectural and the graduate students. So they had 17 students that came here 30 years ago that carried out this study in Speightstown and wrote a report that is two books of drawings and information on the town, which is captured. And among that, they talked about the scale of the town, they talked about the buildings in the town, they talked about the people in the town, the fact that Speightstown is one of the few towns where people live in the town, so that made it unique. And to me that was like fodder. I mean, I ate that up because became very interested in the full history of the area. And Arlington was one of those buildings. In fact, when I told you I was involved in building the shopping center with a friend in Spikestown, which is called the Spikestown Mall, we had the main bank then was the Barbados National Bank. And they decided that they were going to put up their own building. So they were not only our bankers and one of our main tenants in the Spikestown Mall, but they were leaving us. And of course that was something that you can't change. And they were going to build their own bank. But they also wanted to knock down Arlington House, because they said that building had outlived its useful purpose. But I felt differently about it. I felt that the building was a unique part of our history, and it was the building that was the model that was taken from Barbados to the Carolinas, specifically to Charleston, which is called a single house, which is now existing in Charleston along their main street, which happens to be Broad Street, because the Carolinas were settled by the first 4 or 5 governors came from Barbados. So I went about trying to restore Arlington House, and I managed to raise money, and literally I had the satisfaction of getting my hands dirty, so to speak. I was there on a morning and moving things and talking and meeting with small contractors who helped to shape Arlington. And slowly, slowly we put it together. And then government stepped in when we were nearly finished and helped to finish it. But then what were we going to use it for? And at the same time, I had done the first phase of the synagogue project in Bridgetown. And we decided that we were going to build a museum, because there's one thing to restore a synagogue, but to tell the story of the people who built the synagogue and the people and what they contributed to Barbados, we decided to take another building and make a museum. So we decided that Arlington should be another museum. And the same team that did the museum in Bridgetown for the synagogue was the same team that did the museum for Arlington. And it's called an interactive museum because we didn't have artifacts, but we could tell the story. And that team did an extremely good job in both museums. And all I would say is it's there for everyone to see, both museums. Beautiful.
No, and Spikestown is beautiful.
Oh, yes.
We just had a new jetty that is gorgeous, but we're still hearing the same complaints from business people in Spikestown. Nothing is happening for them in Spikestown. They're not getting the traffic that they want in terms of customers.
Well, yes, it is not what we expected. We expected it would be a lot more thriving by now. Again, I see a lot of changes happening. I mean, we have now, you have small businesses, you have middle-sized, medium businesses, and you have the top-end businesses. But the one thing that Spikestown has is the character of the town, that waterfront. The original buildings on the water in Spikestown had their backyards on the beach because they were selling to the people on the street. That is turning around, and gradually it is. I have seen in recent years, I've seen a much greater change, and I am aware that that is going to change at a even faster rate over the next 5 to 10 years. Let's say 5 years. The one thing that would have made a big difference is if Ammon, which was existing, if Sandals had gone ahead and built there. And something in my ear is, I pick up whispers and believe that that will happen. I think they've had a setback. Of course, the main individual behind Sandals, Butch Stewart, he has died recently. So they're doing a little bit of a internal restructuring. And my sense is that Sandals, it can't stay like that. But Port St. Charles is a big project near Spikestown. Port Ferdinand, well, that is trying to find itself. And there are a lot more homes and people moving around Spikestown. As I say, from the smallest house to the bigger house, to the bigger homes. I believe that the Spikestown is on its way. I'm
not dying.
No. It nearly went. It went through a long period of failure. But well, you know, let me say this: we even came up with a plan to redevelop our shopping center with the idea that people want to live in the town and people love living in that town. So we said maybe what we should do is put on a couple of levels of apartments on top of the existing buildings. And we had some sketches drawn up, just that we can't do everything all at once, but that would be something that would make a big difference.
Well, let's look at the capital now, Bridgetown. Another area where you have looked at its renewal. You undertook the massive renovation of the Jewish synagogue. You had the museum as well. Let's look at the synagogue, because a lot of people do not understand how steeped that is in history.
Well, what I would say is that Barbados, by the English history of Barbados, suggests that it was settled in 1627. The synagogue was built in 1654, 27 years after what was described as the first settlement here. And I tell people that that synagogue and that imposing building that we have there, which every Barbadian is proud of, if it was built 27 years after the first settlement, the people didn't arrive 27 years after and start to build it, so they were among the first settlers.
Yeah.
And of course the connection with that synagogue is the introduction of sugar, the fact that these people came from Recife, which was the northern part of Brazil, a Dutch part. So Brazil had the sugar, and they left Recife because they were more comfortable under the Dutch at the time, having been driven out of Spain and Portugal during the Inquisition. And after 200 years in Recife, and Recife now becoming a Portuguese flag kind of area, they decided to leave, came through the Caribbean, settled here, brought sugar, and the history is there, and the building tells that story. You know, it's a fascinating story, and anyone that doubts it just can go in the graveyard and they'll see all of the Spanish-Portuguese names. And those names, of course, then became part of the Barbadian culture. Our first Prime Minister, Errol Barrow, claimed to have originated from Jewish settlers. So part of his origins came from that same synagogue, those people. And if I take you to the graveyard, I can show you the grave with Barrow on it, and next to it I can show you the grave with Baruch, which is the Hebrew name that became Barrow, and so on and so on. So there are many names around here. And what was interesting for me when I did the project was that during the time, and it took me quite a number of years, people would come and say, you know, I have Jewish heritage. And I'm talking about people of every size, color, shape, and persuasion. So that it wasn't limited to one type of person. And the names are here in Barbados still, the original Jewish names.
Now, while Bridgetown for years has been seen as the island's biggest commercial district, we are seeing a shift with many businesses moving out of Bridgetown and going to places like Warrens and Six Roads. One of the biggest concerns, however, in Bridgetown is rent. Many people are leaving because the rents are simply too high. What is your take on that?
I think that is not the real reason right now. I think the real reason is that people started leaving for other reasons, the excitement of going into a new shopping area. And for some reason, the drift out of Bridgetown wasn't sudden. It was over quite a number of years, and it started, I'm going to go back and say 30 years ago.
30?
Yeah, I mean, 30 years ago, you started seeing new things happen outside of towns, whether it was Warrens or whether it was St. Philip, Six Roads, or Spikestown, not really, but other areas. I mean, Sheraton, the shopping center. So the drift started to move away from Bridgetown. And you know, it's an unfortunate thing, but people tend to be influenced easier than you would expect. And the reality of Bridgetown is that where rents may appear high, they shouldn't be high, because supply and demand suggests that if there's, you may have 80% vacancies in Bridgetown in certain areas, that people would want to rent those spaces and would offer them at very competitive prices, because Bridgetown needs to be revived. It needs to be controlled. It needs a management. It needs a mayor. I think it needs someone there with the authority to make things happen, that everything doesn't have to go through a process that, you know, I went to Cuba and I went to Havana. And in Havana, they appointed, at that time, Castro was still there. And they appointed a person, I don't think they called him a mayor, but he was the controller of of Havana. So if you wanted to do anything in Havana, this person could give you an answer. And as a result, I saw things happen in Havana in over a couple of years that may take a lot longer in other places, including Barbados.
So you would like to see Bridgetown with a mayor?
Well, with someone that has the authority. You need someone that is given the authority, not to do whatever they want, but within guidelines. That decisions, the biggest problem we have in getting anything to happen is the delays. And that is costly.
Yeah.
And people get frustrated. You know, I don't want to call names of other islands, but other islands in certain cases get things done a lot more efficiently. We have to improve the level of efficiency of making decisions in this island if we want to revive places like Bridgetown.
No, you've been quoted in the media as saying that the ball was dropped on several vital projects in Bridgetown over the years. Do you mind mentioning some of them?
I specifically, and I spoke of it earlier, I spoke of the Pierhead project. And the Pierhead project was one, as I said, that was started
Spoken about 20 years ago.
or more.
Yeah.
And it just never happened. First of all, I think everyone was afraid to come in and do something in a town that was sort of dwindling in its business activities. So to come in there with a fresh rush at that time was seen to be risky. But my point earlier is that when you think of Bridgetown as one of the most exciting locations because it's right on the water, it has the beach, it has the careenage, it has the history, the World Heritage designation in itself improved the values of what is there. So all it needed now is capital and risk, people that were in a position to take risks. But you know, the risk is limited to the extent of what you expose yourself to in terms of investment.
Well, you're one of the key stakeholders in the Pierhead.
No, I act on behalf of the key state.
Oh, you act on behalf, but
Yes.
where are we with getting that project off the ground?
Well, I can tell you it's very exciting. I just had the main investor here and he left today. So it's a good time for me to tell you that as he left today, he said, let's get it going. In other words, what we're waiting on now is the final permission from government. We have to provide some more information in order to get that. So it isn't that government is delaying this.
Right.
This project is sufficiently important that it's at the level of the Prime Minister, and she is very keen to see it happen. But there are always requirements. There are studies, environmental studies, social impact studies, traffic studies. So we are nearly there. We are nearly there. And I can tell you it is an amazing project. Amazing. I describe it as Lime Grove on steroids.
Wow.
It is an amazing project.
And that's just one project where the ball was dropped in terms of the delay. What else?
Well, the delay meaning that 20 years ago
it was discussed.
It should have happened, but the people behind it didn't have the appetite. And you know, it was a public company. Here you have a private individual, so they can take that risk more than a public company.
And what else did we drop the ball on in terms of projects to revitalize Bridgetown?
I am not sure. The smaller things, I can't think of too many things that where the ball was dropped. I think certainly the Prime Minister, what she's done now with this new park in Fairchild Street, I think that the ability to, you know, she came up with the concept of, and I'm talking about our current Prime Minister Motley, she came up with a full plan for the redevelopment of Carlisle Bay. And of course she wants to put a conference centre where the old geriatric hospital area is next to government headquarters. So she came up with that plan. Now the plan in the end will not exactly mirror what she had drawn up, but it was enough to put the taste and the sense in people's minds that here we have a government that wants this to happen, so let's get it to going. So you have the Hyatt, then you have the Trinidadian investor who has a plan for a 350 odd room hotel nearby, and then you have the Pierhead. And the Pierhead would have, right now the plans have about 150 apartments and 44 beach cabanas and restaurants and shops, and it's very exciting. And I describe it as unique in the sense that 80% of the frontage of that property touches water.
In terms of investor appetite for new projects in Barbados, are you seeing it?
I think that we are seeing some of these new and exciting, interesting projects. You know, one brings the next, and success brings followers. So I'm beginning to see that. I mean, Lime Grove on its own, you know, was a big risk, and the reality of Lime Grove is that we suffered the pandemic.
Yeah.
We suffered a recession in 2008, which carried on beyond when we built this. And we had to fight our way through it. And we continue to, you know, every investment requires very prudent management in every sense. So there's no guarantees, but once Lime Grove starts to shine, people want to do more of this. When we started doing Westmoreland back in 30 years ago, everyone laughed, said who was going to buy an apartment or a townhouse or build a home up in that hill? At that time, people only wanted to be on the beach. So 30 years ago, we proved them wrong, that people will buy something if it is done properly and if it has a good signature to it. It's well done. I think my maybe main comment, if I had to make one this evening, is that if things are well done in Barbados, they will succeed. That would be my main theme. But they have to be well done.
That's a good point on which to lead me into my final question. If you had one wish for development and redevelopment in Barbados after 40 plus years in the real estate market, what would it be?
That people realize that the greatest opportunity is in our towns, and that we find a much more efficient way of getting from start of the concept to start of construction and reality. And the one wish is that the world around us remains peaceful and that we can afford to do these things without watching everything crumble around us. You know, I go to the extent of saying that while everything is going crazy in the world around us, there must be some stability somewhere. So why not let it be here? So let us remain stable and manage what we have here, appreciate it, respect it, and the rest will follow.
Well, Sir Paul, I appreciate you taking the time out to sit and chat with us this evening. It's really been a pleasure.
Well, let me say that it's been my pleasure. I hope that I mentioned a few things that could explain my views, and
Definitely.
they're only my views, so they may not be real, but they're my views.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That was Sir Paul Altman, the Managing Director of Altman Real Estate and Real Estate Mogul. I'm Lisa Lord. Thank you so much for watching One on One. Do have yourself a wonderful evening.